Today, I'm going to suggest something that you've never considered before when planning one of those European holidays that us Australians love so much. Now when we visit Europe, we generally base ourselves in one of the capital cities. In this instance, I would suggest that generally people going over for the Olympics are likely to choose London. But I'd like you to think outside the box, almost literally, and head west from London to the city of Bristol. It's 120 miles to the west of London, and I'd like you to consider why you would do that. But first of all, let's look at some of the benefits that you get when you go to London. Get off your plane and you find that your luggage has been lost, and then you face delays at immigration, and once you've negotiated that, you've got trouble finding your car in one of the many car parks at Heathrow. But it doesn't stop there. Get out into the huge car park that's known as the M4, or whichever freeway it happens to be in one of Paris, Rome, Madrid, you name it. They're all much the same, aren't they? Now, in order to avoid these horrors, I would like to suggest that the historic city of Bristol, with its international airport, will allow you to fly in, collect your luggage, and be in a city centre hotel within an hour at most of landing. How good is that? So what does Bristol have to offer for the traveller? Well, as the real estate agents say, it's location, location, location. 1.5 hours west of London, within 30 minutes of the Cotswolds, 15 minutes from Bath, an hour from Devon and Cornwall, an hour to Stonehenge in Salisbury, and if you go on a little farther, into the New Forest. And if you head west from Bristol, you cross one of the two Severn bridges to get into South Wales. And of course, that international airport with those cheap, maybe €10 flights to European centres. Bristol's a city of great natural beauty and has an amazing history, and yet is at the forefront of technology. And I think this photograph taken of Concorde on its last flight, coming home to the city where it was built, sums this up perfectly. Here you see the beauty of the River Avon cutting a swathe through the rocks of the Avon Gorge, and there sitting grandly above the gorge is Isambard Kingdom Brunel's Clifton Suspension Bridge. And just above it in this picture you can see the observatory, which is only one of two working camera obscuras in the world. And there, right in the middle, is Concorde, designed and built in Bristol at British Aerospace with the engines from nearby Rolls-Royce Aero Engine site. Now let's have a look at some specific attractions that Bristol has to offer. When I used the TripAdvisor site, which is compiled by travellers and not by the industry, there were nearly 100 sites in Bristol. Now don't worry, I'm not going to take you through them all, because there's not enough time, and I've still got to cover the surrounding areas too. But let's have a look at the SS Great Britain, built by Isambard Kingdom Brunel. Yes, that's the same guy who built the Clifton Suspension Bridge, I can tell you're listening. He also incidentally constructed the Great Western Railway that runs from London to Bristol and is still one of the fastest and straightest routes in the world. You can actually get to Bristol from London within an hour. It was Brunel's vision that you could travel on his transport from London via train to Bristol and then on to New York. The Great Britain was the first screw-driven steel-hulled ship in the world. The wreck of it was brought back from the Falkland Islands in the early 1970s and has been undergoing restoration ever since. Bristol has a great seafaring tradition. You might recall the phrase shipshape and Bristol fashion as something that is really tidy. Bristol was also very prominent in the slave trade, and there are many reminders around the city with street names such as White Ladies Road and Black Boy Hill. Let's move away from the city centre and go up and have a look at that bridge up in the highly prosperous Clifton, and there in all its glory across the Avon Gorge is Brunel's suspension bridge. The views from the bridge down the river, some 600 feet below, are stunning, and at night when it's lit up it seems to literally hang in mid-air. The bridge has also had the misfortune to be the site of many suicide jumps, and actually featured at the start of Australian novelist Michael Rowbotham's thriller Shatter. It also featured in the movie Go Now, starring Robert Carlyle. Let's move into Clifton itself, and there we'll come to the Zoological Gardens. This scores 4 out of 5 on TripAdvisor, and much like Perth, the gardens are very close to the city centre and as a consequence are compact, but they're stunning, and animal welfare is paramount. The zoo shot to fame at one stage for being the first to ever successfully breed white tigers in captivity. There are plans for the zoo to have a much bigger annex in the north of the city where animals will be allowed to roam in much more natural surroundings. But Bristol Zoo remains a great day out. Move down into the city centre now, and St Mary Redcliffe Church. Again it scores 4 out of 5 on TripAdvisor. It was described by Queen Elizabeth I as the fairest and goodliest parish church in all the land, and who am I to argue with good Queen Bess? It's actually the biggest parish church in Great Britain, and many people mistake it for the cathedral. It contains the tomb of the poet Thomas Chatterton and of the founder of Pennsylvania, William Penn, who was actually born in Bristol. Perhaps less well known, it was the church where my parents were married back in 1945, and where, 30 years later, I acted as best man to my great friend Graham Ruddock. Oh, and of course immediately behind the church there's a street named Pruitt Street. You just can't miss this place, I promise you. Now let's just cross over the River Avon into the dock side of the area, and here we see the world famous Landogger Trow Inn. It was in this pub that Alexander Selkirk met Daniel Defoe, who was then inspired to write the story under the title of Robinson Crusoe. It was also reputed to be the notorious Spyglass Inn, where Blind Pew gave Long John Silver the black spot in Treasure Island. Whatever the stories and myths there are, this is right in the heart of the historical Bristol. King Street, in which the inn is situated, contains other inns such as the Old Duke, famous for its jazz, and a Naval Volunteer. It also houses the Bristol Old Vic, Britain's oldest working theatre. And at the top end of this 100-yard street, which houses 15 pubs, and I know because I visited them all in one night, are the naval almshouses for distressed seamen, and they date back to the early 1700s. Now let's look around Bristol. 15 minutes away is the compact Roman city of Bath, and here in this particular picture you can see how well renovated those Roman baths are. And there, towering above the baths, is the Abbey. And then there's the Royal Crescent, famous Georgian Crescent. And off at Claverham is the American Museum. In the city centre, the Jane Austen Museum. And Sally Lunn's Bun Shop. And we mustn't forget, bridging the river with shops on it, and below is Pulteney Weir. Bath is very compact and very beautiful. And the county of Somerset lies directly to the south of Bristol, and amongst its attractions are Cheddar Gorge, Cheddar Caves, and of course the factory where you can get real cheddar cheese. You can also get real cider. They've sent more men into space than NASA ever did. And then there's the seaside town of Weston-super-Mare, the home of Geoffrey Archer and John Cleese. Down further along the coast towards the Devon border is Dunster Castle, and the capital of the county town, Taunton, bridging the River Tone with its own castle. And then for our music aficionados, there's the town of Portishead. If we move north of Bristol into Gloucestershire, there's the Cotswolds, which beautiful villages such as Broadway, which is the jewel in the crown, Bourton on the Water with the beautiful River Windrush in its model village, the twin villages of Upper and Lower Slaughter, Morton and the Marsh, Stow on the Wold, Painswick, Burford, Stroud, the home of Laurie Lee, Castle Combe, the site for the filming of Dr. Dolittle. And of course, you can always go royal watching, as the Cotswold houses the homes of Prince Charles and Camilla, Princess Anne and the Duke and Duchess of Kent. Now let's head down towards the south coast, and we'll go down to get to Stonehenge. And that's a really spiritual experience. It's believed to have been constructed in about 2500 BC and is probably the oldest human construction you'll ever see. And just look at it and wonder why and how. And then head down from there into the beautiful city of Salisbury, dominated by the cathedral. It was built in the early 1200s. It was the inspiration for Ken Follett's novel Pillars of the Earth. And the cathedral library contains the best preserved of the 4 surviving copies of the Magna Carta. On from Salisbury is the New Forest. Here you can see the famous New Forest ponies up on the heathland and visit the shipyard of Henry VIII's flagship the Great Harry at Buckler's Hard. Or you can visit Bewley Motor Museum and stately home, and the beautiful villages of Lyndhurst and Brockenhurst. If we head west from Bristol, we can go over into South Wales. Go up to Ross-on-Wye, Simmons Yat on the Wye Valley, and up onto the Brecon Beacons. You go over on one Severn Bridge and back on another. The river itself is the second highest tidal range in the world and made construction of the first bridge very problematical. It wasn't actually constructed until 1965 and the second bridge in the 1990s. Prior to that, the only way of crossing the river was either by train through a tunnel or using the Ost River ferry. So, Bristol. What does it offer? Easy access to some beautiful country, easy airport to get into and out from, and cheap flights into Europe. You'd be a fool not to go there.